This is Zoe Alvarado, and welcome to Odessa After Dark, the week of May 28th. On this show, Daniel Ryan will have an interview with Mitzi Scheible, the Ector County Elections Administrator. Daniel Ryan and I will have the first of a two-part interview with Rene Morris from the Odessa Crisis Center. And finally, Zach Herrard will interview community activist Art Leal on the special election week Odessa After Dark. Election day is tomorrow. If you're unsure of your polling location, go to the site at the bottom of your screen. And now, with the interview of Ector County Elections Administrator Mitzi Scheible.
The day before Election Day, and I'm here with Mitzi Scheible, who is in charge of the Ector County Election Department. Hello, Mitzi.
Hello.
So, how was early voting? How do you think it's gone compared to previous primaries?
Well, compared to the 08, the numbers aren't quite as high. I don't expect them to be as high as the 08 because we had a lot more controversy with the presidents, the Democrat presidents, candidates and stuff like that. So we have a good turnout on the Republicans.
Well, there's not much excitement on the Democratic side.
No, there's not. But there's not a lot of offices on the Democrat side, and especially for us countywide, there's not.
No, there's no offices countywide
No.
that are contested. But on the Republican side, with the sheriff and the county attorney, and even here at, next door to you, that office has gotten a little heated. And so, as you said, the Republican numbers are
All right.
but but in 2008, though, when we had the Republican primary, the presidential race on that side was already decided by the time we got here for John McCain. And so it's, and I was hoping too that it wasn't, just for our poor little primary, that Rick would have stayed in a little bit longer, because if it was held in March when it was supposed to be, we might have had even higher turnout.
Yes, that would.
And so what was the reason why we're delayed here until May 29th, till tomorrow?
Well, the reason why is because of the congressional districts. They, in the east counties in Bear, Tarrant County, and things like that, they have issues over the senatorial and congressional lines. And so then there were lawsuits, so that just postponed the big March primaries.
Now you have a lot of different polling places tomorrow that you don't normally have. You made some changes. So do you think there's going to be much confusion tomorrow?
I hope not, because the paper has done a wonderful job as far as putting everything in the paper, and the news media seem to be announcing. And of course, I'm going to stress it a lot more to and put the word out there, that the polling places that we have consolidated the polling places.
Well, and then when do the new precincts take effect? Because it's not tomorrow. So would it be in November?
No, actually, the new precincts are in effect right now.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in effect as of, January 1.
Okay, so when you mailed out the voter registration cards, if somebody was, say, in the new precinct 111, it would say so on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that will help elicit a little bit with the confusion.
Right.
Now, how long have you been the Ector County Administrator here?
Well, I've been the Elections Administrator 5 years, be 5 years in September. I've been with this office total 22 years in August.
Now, when you took over, it was rather controversial. So you could step into the office, and you have two predecessors that what they did and saw what they did right, what they did wrong. And so how did you want to put your own personal stamp on the job?
Well, I felt like, I just felt like I needed to change a few things, and I always consult with the county judge, and I stay in communication with the county commissioners And I think that helps a whole lot. It creates trust.
Now, what's the number one question people ask you?
The number one,
Uh-huh.
what do you do?
Okay, so that's not the one that I
No,
thought would be the
no.
most popular one, but
No.
I'm about to ask it. So first, okay, so
Okay.
what do you do?
Say, what do you do all year?
Uh-huh.
But we're actually busy all year, you know. We do other things other than just, you know, we register people all the time, and we have reports that we have to do throughout the year and prepare and legislation.
Now, for some people who are watching, they may not understand, but the Department of Justice has a big say in what happens in Ector County when it comes to voting.
Yes, they do.
Now, why is that?
Well, in 2005, we were put under a judgment due to the lack of not having enough bilingual clerks at the polling places. But we're no longer under that judgment, but we still abide by what their rules are. We still have the bilingual clerks, they still go through training, and I still send reports to the DOJ, even though I don't have to. And we had to create an advisory committee, and we always meet before election, and then once the election is over, we meet again.
So that would be one of those areas that you, unlike your predecessors, have been pretty successful in.
Yes.
So that's a good thing.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, my number one question is, why don't people vote?
Oh. Well, I don't understand that myself either, because, and I don't know if people are just so disgusted with the way the government is right now, and the national government, all the issues. But I really think it has to do with education. I don't believe that the children in schools are being educated enough.
Okay.
Back when I first started in this job, we would have teachers that would come and get supplies, take it to the class, and they'd have them mock elections. Very seldom do we have that anymore.
When you switch from the paper ballot to the electronic ballot, did that effect turn out at all?
No, I really don't. I don't think so.
If you're watching, please vote. We have spent lots of money to have the election department for your benefit. And so you're paying taxes so you can vote. And so if you don't vote, then
That's right. And if you don't vote, you're letting someone else make your decision.
we've been such a one-party state. First it was Democrats in charge, and then we have Republicans in charge. So, but we've never really had a lot of split government.
No.
And so, and we'll find that in November, I think we'll have a large turnout, I hope, but we still won't have any countywide races except for Precinct 3.
That's right. That's true.
So,
Unless we have a independent.
right, and somebody we don't know
Yeah.
steps up.
Right.
Okay. And how many, do you ever get in write-in people at the last moment?
Normally, no. And lots of times they'll file an application with the judge, but then when it comes time to turn in the petition, they don't usually turn it in.
Anything you want to add? Because that's all the questions I have for you. Tomorrow will be a busy, busy day for you.
Yes, it will be. And I just ask everybody to please get out and vote.
Okay. And about what time will we start having results?
Well, see, the polls will close at 7. I hope by 8:30.
Okay. Well, this will be an interesting place Tuesday night at
Yeah.
8:30. So watch your local news, and we'll find out who our next sheriff is and our county attorney, and who's going to run in November. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And now our interview with our community activist, Art Leal.
Hello, this is Zach Gerard with Odessa After Dark. We have here Art Leal, who's the founder of Una Voz Unida.
Thank you. I'm glad you asked me to come out tonight.
Well, first, tell me about your dad and what influence he had on you growing up.
My dad had a big influence on me. My dad, was born on a labor camp in La Mesa, Texas, with a delayed birth certificate. He was an American citizen, born right here in the United States. But as he grew up, he learned that speaking out was very important. And I got to watch my dad in Crystal City, where a lot of the civil rights movement started in Texas. I got to watch him attend meetings. I got to attend some of those meetings with him. I was very young. Some of those meetings I don't even remember, but I do remember going to some sort of meeting. But later my dad told me that some of those meetings were held by Odessa Gutierrez, who was a very big activist at that time. Growing up, we didn't live in Lamesa long. We moved to Odessa when I was probably about 7 years old. So I only remember Odessa mostly. But growing up at home, you know, my dad, he ran for mayor in the 70s a couple of times. He ran for city council a couple of times. I remember campaigning for him as a youngster, and you know, so that made a really big impact on me.
Well, 4 years ago this month, you ran for mayor and lost. What goes through your mind around Election Day?
You know, I remember the elections of 2008. It was fun. It was a very big learning experience. I admire anybody who decides to run for public office. It's a very admirable thing to do. It's very hard. It's very hard to do. There are some people, just for whatever reason, won't like you. And when you're a person who likes to be liked, it can be difficult. But coming this time around, this time of year, I start getting the questions. Are you going to run for mayor again? What are you going to do? What are your plans? And right now, it's just kind of, I don't really have an answer for that yet. Anything can change. I know there's still quite a bit of time left before the November election, because the city elections were moved to November. So anything can change from now until then.
If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be and why?
If I could change one thing about myself, I'd probably change not being so sensitive. Like I said, I like to be liked, and I want people to like me, and I see myself as a likable person. I know there are some things that I do and that the organization does that doesn't make people very happy. But I think if people really understand that we're trying to do something, when we see something that's wrong, we want to make sure that we do our best to try to fix it. So if I have to change anything, you know, when I get negative comments on the blogs and so on who'll attack me personally from people who don't know me, it hurts, but you got to have a tough skin in this type of work. And if I could change anything, I would just not be so sensitive, because sometimes those things stay with me for a couple of days.
Why don't people in Ector County vote?
You know, that baffles me still to this day. After the 2008 elections, that was one of my biggest concerns after I left, because I was so disappointed in the turnouts that we had at the polls, especially some of the turnouts that we had in some of our southern, you know, in the south side of Odessa, the Blackshear poll, the Salinas Park poll, and there was just very few. And I still haven't figured out why they don't. I think most of the time we have a lot of people who just feel that their vote doesn't matter, or their vote doesn't care. They don't care about people don't care about their vote, or that they don't know how the issues or how voting is going to affect them. So, and that's why we figured with this organization, we can put out the information and let people know what issues are out there, what issues affect them, to empower them to want to vote. It's a difficult task. There's a large number of voting age population in Ector County that are not registered to vote, and there's a large number that are registered but just don't vote. So the reason why they don't vote, those are the only reasons I can think of, is that they don't really understand how it's going to affect them.
In your opinion, why do we have such a political divide in the country right now?
You know, there are a lot of things that people do to try to get people's vote. I think right now what's a really popular thing nowadays is this sense of extreme nationalism. A lot of it started right after 9/11. It got really, really intense. And, you know, so we have this, you know, don't take away what's mine, this is my country kind of thing. It kind of increased even more after President Obama was elected. And certainly him having an African name or a Muslim name didn't help at all. But I think what a lot of times what some of the public really would really attach themselves to that. And the Tea Party certainly attached themselves to that. It became very popular. And so now there's there's this take our country back type of mentality, that it's been taken away from us. And, you know, and some of the things that come out of the mouth of some is really disappointing. It really, I think it really hurts the country on some of the things that are said. But I think, you know, I don't want to say that it's racism, but I do think that there's a sense of extreme nationalism that has really taken over the country.
What is your secret fantasy job?
My secret fantasy job. I guess my secret fantasy job would be able to do what I do now, but get paid for it. I really enjoy, you know, being the leader of this organization. I enjoy the work that we do, the activism that we do, the advocacy that we do, the agitation that we do. I really enjoy it. It would be nice to get paid for it, but unfortunately, that's not going to happen. We barely have enough to make ends meet, even though there are some out there who say that we have a lot of money in the coffers. According to a website called Manta, we have about $100,000 in the coffers, but that's not true. We probably have about $150.
We thank you for taking the time to sit down with us and answer a few questions. If there's any people out there that are interested in joining your organization, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can find us first and foremost on Facebook, facebook.com/Una Voz Unida. They could also find us on Twitter, @Una Voz Unida. We're also on YouTube. Just do a search for Una Voz Unida Political, and you can find a lot of our videos there. And you can also find us on Blogger, unavozunida.blogspot.com, and you can find our newsletter there. We do have a website, but most everything of our website has kind of migrated over to Facebook, but the website is unavozunida.com.
Zoe, and we're here with Rene Morris, who is the Assistant ED of the Odessa Crisis Center, who serves the Ector, Andrews, Crane, Gaines, Reeves, Ward, and Winkler counties. So the Crisis Center has a really broad mission. Could you tell us more about what it is and what you do?
Absolutely. The Crisis Center opened in 1981 as the Odessa Rape Crisis Center, and we served at that time victims of sexual violence. In the last 11 years, we started providing services to victims of domestic violence as well. And so we provide advocacy, intervention, shelter, and education to the community or victims of crime.
Now, one of the things listed on the website is about suicide. But we were talking before we went on the air that you folks don't really handle a lot of suicide cases, that you refer them. So can you tell me, if someone called the 24-hour hotline and says, I can't do it anymore, what would you do?
Absolutely. We have that 24-hour hotline, and we do what we call crisis intervention. And so you talk to a person, and there are skills, and we've received training on how to get the information from them to make them understand how valuable they are, what their worth is. Just having a conversation with them. And so if they continue to say, I'm going to take my life, or I feel like hurting myself, then is by law we need to get them some help. And we usually call the mental health sheriff, which will be able to assess them and get them the help that they need before they do something.
What's Odessa Crisis Center or the community? Because you talked about the sheriffs, and sometimes we've had bad ends where the sheriff's been involved when someone's suicidal lately. And so what is the community doing that you know of to help reduce suicide rates?
I think just the awareness of what would cause or what would be the triggers for somebody that wants to take their life, and that's where we focus on. If we have a woman, let me give an example. If we have a woman in the shelter that says maybe she's depressed and she says, I feel like hurting myself, and so they already know because of the it's part of our policies, and so we will ask the deputy sheriff, the mental health sheriff, to come in, and what they do is just talk to them And if that client says, yes, I do feel like taking my life, then we help transport to the hospital where there's another assessment. Then we take them to one of the facilities here in our community that would help them, whether it's medication or it may just be for that moment. But I think the fact that it's prevalent, or not prevalent, because it's happening with our youth, that people are paying attention more. And I think that's great, because what we deal with is what I was going to say, is what would make a youth or a young person want to take their lives. And so there's a variety of things that are going on in our society that are triggers for that.
Well, I've heard that one of the things you also deal with, and another thing that might cause a trigger, is bullying. And how much of an issue is that here in Odessa?
It's a huge issue. We do community education and awareness in the schools and with faith communities and parent groups also. And parents also say that their children are being bullied, and a lot of times they don't know what to do, and it continues. A lot of times a young person is afraid to tell their mom, dad, or somebody, a trusted individual there at the school, because it's not a cool thing to tell, but actually it's a crime. And when we go out and talk to the kids, to the youth, we let them know that this is a crime. This is something that it's not okay, and you can't handle it by yourself. And so you tell a trusted individual, but it's important for the adult community to take action when that does. If a young person comes and says this person is doing this, then that adult needs to take action. And if we tell the parents, if you tell the teacher and you tell the principal, then you tell the ECISD police, then you don't stop until you get some type of resolution, because children are afraid to go to school. They're not doing well in school. And then we've got the cyber bullying. That's huge. It's not always face-to-face and pushing and laughing at you in the hallway, but it's online. And
we'll be right back with Rene Morris to talk about the issue of sexual violence.
And we are back. The next issue that we're going to talk about is sexual violence. And it's interesting personally, because you were founded in 1981,
yes.
And my own sister was raped and murdered in 1981. And so this issue is very, very personal. So my first question, what does the Crisis Center do when someone calls and tells you they've been sexually assaulted?
The majority of the time when we receive a call about a person that's been sexually assaulted, it is either from the hospital or the police department or the sheriff's department. And what we do is go to their aid. We meet them either at the police station or at the hospital, and we provide advocacy and intervention. The very first thing that the Crisis Center does is walk in and identify ourselves and let them know that we are sorry for what has happened and that it wasn't their fault. And that is the statement that a victim of sexual violence needs to hear more than anything, because it is one of those crimes that the victim always believes that they did something to cause it. Whether it was having too much to drink, wearing the wrong thing, maybe you went out on a date, maybe that victim always tries to normalize or rationalize how this could have happened. It had to be something that they did. And so that, we also have a campaign that said, start by believing. That is the response of this community. That is the response that needs to be the response of this community. Law enforcement, parents, whoever, is that if a person says, I was raped, your first response should be, I believe you. Not, where were you? What time were you there? And so that's huge.
Do you think it's because of two factors? One, the criminal justice system. When anybody who has raped somebody, the first thing that the defense always does is try to paint the victim as they asked for it,
Absolutely.
Basically. And then the other thing is that we always, as society, want to know, we don't want it to happen to us, so we think that you did something to bring us on.
Absolutely. We do understand that date rape is more prevalent. Most of the times, and these are stats, and I don't have the exact stats, But date rape is more common, acquaintance rape, non-stranger rape. And for years, we believed that it was the stranger in the alley that was the rape victim, or the rapist. But actually, a lot of times it's someone you know, whether we're talking about children or youth. It could be the next door neighbor, it could be the uncle, it could be your boyfriend, it could even be your husband. It wasn't but a few years ago that it became against the law for a man to rape his wife. Yes, yes. It's part of changing the culture and the attitude and the belief that it starts, in our opinion, with prevention, because we're doing prevention also. What is society's attitude toward the female anatomy? What do we do? What does media do? What does consumers, if you're selling a car, you have this beautiful woman on this car. So it objectifies the female body, okay? And so what happens is people's attitudes and belief systems that, well, then they deserved it. If she hadn't worn that, then maybe she was asking for it.
But okay, I'm going to interrupt. But what happens is people get confused about what sexual assault is. That has nothing to do with sex. It's just an act of violence.
It is an act of violence.
And so it doesn't matter if this woman is taking her picture with a car and all sexy. That's an act of, like I'm trying to stimulate you. But it's the same thing as taking a gun to somebody and shooting them. And so we miss that.
We think because it's sex, it's not sex, it's violence. It is an act of violence. Thank you for bringing that out. A prostitute can be raped, okay? And I've heard people say, well, she's on the street, so that's what she's doing. But if she chooses to say no, if a girlfriend, you're out on a date and you might be kissing or whatever, and you say, I changed my mind. Alcohol is the #1 date rape drug. That's why we're on the college campuses. Drink responsibly. If you're going to drink responsibly. It doesn't mean that if you get drunk that you ask for it. It just means that your ability to make wise choices or to fight off or to stay
away from situations?
Yeah, because you just, a lot of the calls that we get are from young women that maybe went out with their girlfriends and somehow they ended up at this house that they were all partying at, and that's no problem. But then they wake up the next morning and they've been assaulted. Whether it was a date rape drug or whether it was alcohol, it's happening, and then they're ashamed because they think they caused it. If they hadn't been out there, if they hadn't been drinking. And so what the Crisis Center does is, first of all, provide that intervention, that advocacy. We have support groups for victims of sexual assault. It is a horrific crime. It is not only a physical crime, but it is an assault to the soul. What it takes from a person that is assaulted in that manner is a lifelong healing. It absolutely is.
So those are just a few common myths of rape. But are there any more specifics that society just looks at and say, just assume?
Absolutely. Male rape. Okay. 1 in 3 females at some point in their lifetime, and those are hard stats. And 1 in 6 females, 1 in 20 men will be raped in some time in their lifetime. And we have talked to men. We have responded to a sexual violence of a man, and he is ashamed. The first thing he's afraid is people will believe that he's gay, and he is not gay. That he's weak, that he's not a man, and especially if he's raped by a woman, because that can happen also. And so there's so many erroneous beliefs out there. And so the victim of sexual violence is usually silent, and they carry that with them, which impacts the whole rest of their life. How they view relationships, how they view life, it can change their whole life. And so it's so important for them. And what we tell clients is you cannot put that in the closet. You can't put it in the closet and think it will go away, because it will stay there until you face it and get healing. Even if that offender is not apprehended, you have to take care of yourself.
Now, since 1981, when you were founded, are more people coming forward and calling and saying they were sexually assaulted? And are they going through the whole process? If the accuser is found or they know the accuser, which happens a lot of times, are they prosecuting?
They're prosecuting. Just recently they changed the definition of rape, so it's more, it gives more meat to the law, because, and we can talk about that in a little bit. Are we getting more calls? Not as many as we would like, because is it a crime of victims are ashamed and they think that they caused it. And what was your other question you asked me?
Well, because since you're here now,
Yeah.
you would hope that more people would come forward, and that is the whole point of being here,
Absolutely.
is that nobody should be raped and have to deal with it by themselves.
It's something, because we help victims of sexual violence as well as domestic violence or teen dating violence. Usually within those relationships, the domestic violence or the teen dating violence, sexual violence is part of that. And so that always comes out. In our shelter, we've seen over 3,300 women and children come through the door. At least 85% of the women that come through those doors were sexually violated as children, okay? And so they grow up with that belief that they deserved it, that they were just an object.
So how do you change someone's belief system?
How do you change? It starts with that person, then it starts with that, it's the nucleus. You start with that person, and then you branch out. It's like, and then it becomes the society. It's so difficult. We can't change it. This is not something that you can change in a few months. But if you can change one person, and that person can change another person, and then it can impact the family, and then community, and then society. And it's difficult because our society is run by sex.
Well, it's like food. You can't get away from it.
You can't get away from
Right.
it.
And I love to eat, and
Yeah.
so I'll let people assume the other. But you have to have a healthy balance.
And so part of our education to our youth and to the community is, what is a healthy relationship? What does it look like? What does it feel like? So what are the signs if it's not a healthy relationship? What are the things that you should do when you go out on a date for the first time? I tell our youth and my own family, my own kids, the buddy system still works. In elementary school, you go out together, you go home together. There's a safety. There's safety tips and dynamics that we have to teach our young people, because otherwise they fall prey to it. Okay, especially when they leave the safety of their own home and the parents, and they go away to school. It's very prevalent. Ages 16 to 24 at the highest risk of interpersonal violence, and that includes sexual violence.
Well, how can someone volunteer, or what do you need assistance with, if anything?
Absolutely. We have a volunteer training twice a year. We will have one in the summer. For the crisis response, that is huge, because we have a crisis response team that responds 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to these crimes. We will go to the home if we're activated by the police, or to the hospital. And so that is volunteers. We need volunteers. You have to be 18 or over for that. We also have the shelter. There are things to do there, working with the women or the children. There are volunteer opportunities here in the administration office. So you would just need to call and get an application. You can come in and fill out an application, pass the background check, and then we would get you training for whatever you chose to do.
Okay. Well, thank you for letting us interview you today. And
You're more than welcome.